Another case that I cited in the book that I wanted to spend some time talking about was the Brock Turner case. And this case was a poorly understood case with a murky facts situation that became a social media sensation where activists were pushing this idea that the perpetrator, Brock Turner, got a light sentence because he was a white male. And as is typical with so many of these stories, the media did a terrible job of reporting it or even trying to understand why the judge, Alan Persky, gave out what seemed to be a light sentence, which was essentially 6 months. And again, this is typical. Very rarely do people try to understand the complicated factors that go into some of these decisions. Now, if you read Judge Persky's reasoning, one of the reasons he gave Brock Turner a seemingly light sentence was that he believed that Brock Turner believed subjectively that the victim was consenting to the activities that Turner was accused of. The judge didn't say that this belief was objectively reasonable, but Turner's subjective belief had some impact on the sentence, and rightfully so. Obviously, someone who engages in activity that they believe is consensual, even if for some reason that belief isn't reasonable, that person's less culpable than someone who deliberately commits a crime. And you could argue that regardless, this may still have been a light sentence, but there's no reason to believe that the sentence was delivered based on favoritism due to race or sex. Nonetheless, this got people stirred up into angry mobs. Judge Persky was ultimately recalled from his judgeship, and his persecution didn't end there. Apparently, he was a coach of high school girls' tennis. No evidence to suggest that he was predatory or a threat to these girls in any way. And yet these activists complained, and he lost his job as a coach as well. So very unfortunate. I do remember at the time, when this story first broke, I was having a lot of debates and discussions with people about it. And I pointed out that Persky was a California Democrat, probably liberal, progressive, to the left in his politics. And some of my friends from law school who know that I'm more right-wing in my politics, they really disliked that I pointed out his political affiliation. And some of them said, well, you shouldn't be tribal in your politics when it comes to these issues. And they misunderstood what I was trying to say. Granted, I am more rightward in my politics. I probably wouldn't agree with Judge Persky's politics, but I wasn't trying to criticize him for his political affiliation by any means. And in fact, I have no reason to believe he was anything other than an honorable public servant. My whole point in pointing out his politics was to explain that the source of his decision wasn't any kind of favoritism to white men. This was probably part and parcel of his ideology. I suspect, although I don't know for sure, he was probably an adherent to a philosophy known as restorative justice. And restorative justice is a philosophy that's not too uncommon in the legal field. Restorative justice tends to emphasize rehabilitation over punishment. Those who embrace this philosophy tend to look negatively upon incarceration. And this philosophy is not an entirely bad philosophy, in my opinion. I think it's more appropriate for nonviolent crimes, but nonetheless, reasonable people embrace it. You can argue its merits or its demerits. The bottom line here is this. There's no reason to believe that the judge was motivated by any kind of inappropriate prejudice, and yet people got stirred up into a frenzy about this. And this is so typical of, again, why I wrote the book and why I'm trying to educate people about these issues. There's just no evidence to suggest that our system shows favoritism to men or to white men in particular. And there's no reason to believe that our system is unfair to female victims. And when you run into cases like this where the media misreports these things, it's so important to get into the facts and the details to understand the complicated factors that lead to these outcomes.